Justin. Good evening. Welcome to the December 18th, 2023 special call meeting of Valdese Town Council. If you would, please stand for the invocation, and then we'll do the pledge of allegiance. Please, bow your heads and pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the season of Christmas and for the true reason we celebrate. We pray that thankfulness, kindness, and compassion will fill our hearts at Christmas and stay with us throughout the year. Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, Council, we'll dive right in here. Under new business, item A, consideration of agreement between Western Piedmont Council of Government and the town of Valdese for the provision of strategic planning assistance. And the date on that contract is January 1 of 24 to April 30th of 24. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I'm reading this contract. I guess it's at the discretion of the council to determine whether or not we're going to include, there's two different costs to the contract. Do we know what option we're going to take?
I have not heard a decision on that option.
Well, there's an option where we can mail out a survey. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I think there's an option to mail a survey, and then there's an option not to.
If Mr. Ogle made the motion, do you know which option?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I do not.
I would amend the motion to use the second option, which is them doing the mailing, which I believe I saw on the agenda package is the amount that the finance director has recommended for an amendment. So I think that will be consistent.
Okay.
Will that mail out go to, do we know how many citizens? I guess the cog's not here, so.
I don't know that they have that number yet.
The cog is here.
Anthony? We'll let Anthony speak to that. Mr. Starr from Western Piedmont Council of Government.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We're glad to work with you on this project. So the mailing options, either way, the survey would be conducted. The question on the two options are whether or not the town would directly mail those surveys. So we would provide the survey, collect the survey, analyze them, still do all that work. The question is, do you want to take care of doing the postage and the envelope stuffing yourselves, or do you want us to do that for you? The additional cost is simply the cost of printing envelopes, self-addressed stamped envelopes, and the postage.
Previous mailings, Mr. Starr, what type of return rate have you experienced in the past?
So mail survey will generate a strong return rate. Typical, if you achieve 10 to 15% response rate, that's good by survey standards. We'll also conduct online surveys if you'd like, and have the survey on online format. It can be distributed in other ways. There's a few logistical details we can talk through about what your preferences are on that. Things like, are there particular topics you want us to include in the survey, for example, too, that we can work out in the coming days.
Thank you.
And that second option is $8,030.
Yeah, the difference is less, again, just the materials cost. The labor is the same for us either way.
And this is typical to a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, what the citizens see, and also what the COG provided for us as a council previously, which was I thought it was very good.
Yes, sir. This process and the agreement would include conducting 2 to 3 public forums at your discretion sometime in January. And COG staff would facilitate those forums, get input from the public about things that are going on in the town, what their needs are, what their priorities are. We would synthesize synthesize those results and then present that to the council at a meeting after those public forums. Then we would go through like you have gone through before with me facilitating, a session where you identify your priorities and needs as a town council for the future. And then those two things put together, after you consider that public input, and you identify the needs based on reacting to that public input and your own wisdom and insight, then we'll draft a document that is a strategic plan for you, and then at a subsequent meeting, present that to you for your consideration and your adoption.
Any more questions for Anthony? Okay. Heather, Mr. Harvey amended the motion. Will you second it?
Yes.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor signify if you would by raising your hand and also stating yes. Raise your right hand and state yes.
Yes.
Those opposed, same sign, only state no. Okay, motion carries. The reason for the raising of the hands is since we're videotaping, it's easier for folks at home to see how we vote, or how you guys vote. Okay, next item B, consideration of agreement between Western Piedmont Council of Government and the town of Valdese for HR services for town manager search, December 4th, 2023 to May 31st of 2024. Mr. Starr, would you like to speak to that, please? Should have just kept you up there.
Thank you again, Mayor and Council. So, at your request, we put together an overview document that includes an outline of the process and the timing. We have conducted the manager searches for most of the local governments in the region over the last number of years. The team would be myself, our Director of HR and Administration, David Pugh here, and Tasman Mack, our HR coordinator. Just a little bit about myself for the benefit of the public. I'm a former town manager and a county department head prior to working at the Council of Governments. We've done quite a number of these searches over the years. David Pugh, our HR director, he's got 13 years experience as a town manager himself. So a couple of key points that I'll make, and there's some details that we can go over at closed session if you choose to go with us on this search process. We do not tell you who to hire. We simply guide you through the process, handle the logistics for you. We'll help you identify the attributes that you're needing and desiring in your next town manager candidate. And we'll help you evaluate the candidates and point out the pros and cons of those candidates and present those to you. And then you decide who you're going to interview. You'll get a copy of all the applications. We'll help you write the interview questions based on the topics that you're seeking to evaluate about. And we'll help you provide observations to you as you go through that interview process. I would point out for the public's benefit is that your hands are very much tied on confidentiality under North Carolina law. You're not going to be able to share the identity of any candidates under state law. You do not have the discretion to release the names of any candidates without their permission. So, and for obvious reasons, candidates are not going to do that because it would jeopardize their current employment if it became known that they were a candidate for this position. It is a competitive market out there. There are, just like every other employment sector, there are more retirements occurring than ever before, and there is a shortage of managers across the state. But we have a good network of people that we can help with and help you with. As I sit on the board for the North Carolina City and County Managers Association, and we'll also advertise at length, and I'll pass these out because some of you had asked for additional information. Take one, pass it down. You have some options about, you don't have to decide that right this moment, but there's some options included on that document, updated document, about how far of a advertising base do you use in terms of trying to reach candidates through this process. Overall, there's a timeline there, but you should expect that this process would last, till you go through the interview stage. It's going to take you into April or May before you eventually appoint the next manager, sometime probably in May. have to serve a notice of, at their current employer, so it's probably gonna be June before your next manager would arrive here after serving some sort of notice of resignation there. At the bottom of that document, on the back side of that page, are some advertising costs. There's a base ad option. There's the southeast option, southeastern United States, which includes, some additional ways to reach potential candidates. And then there's the national option there in terms of advertising. And we don't add any additional cost for our services on any of those options. Is the additional costs that are shown are just what we believe the range of cost will be based on which option you choose. And in fact, you don't have to choose any one of those exact three options. If there's just individual sources or publications that you want to use, we can mix and match that as you see fit. But in a nutshell, we would get started here in January and come back if you select to use us. In January, we talk to you in closed session about the attributes that you're looking for in the next manager. We provide some other details for you. We recommend advertising the position about 30 days. You can go longer if you like. I would say that the conventional wisdom in the industry these days, because of that shortage of labor, is to not rush your process, but don't let the grass grow under your feet either. Because if your process takes too long, good candidates will accept other jobs before you get to the end of the end stage, before you're ready to offer them the job if that's who your top candidate is. So it's in your interest to move deliberately but swiftly through the process. What else? That's the process in a nutshell. Like I said, we don't tell you who to hire. If you ask me who the best candidate is, I'm not going to answer that question. I know, and I do get that question from councils from time to time, and I will just simply point out how I see certain candidates check certain boxes for you and other candidates don't, or vice versa, and help you hopefully have clarity about who it is you are seeking in the candidates that you seek to employ. So we don't have any sort of agenda in terms of what we're trying to do. We're a nonpartisan organization. As you full well know, you are one of the owners of our organization, so our interest is simply to help you find the best fit for the town of Valdese, because I might have my own ideas about a certain candidate, but at the end of the day, that doesn't really matter, because once the candidates all cross that threshold of being capable of doing the job, it's about figuring out which one seems like the best fit for you to work alongside, because this is probably the most important decision you'll make as a council, is hiring your town manager, because they are the person that will implement all of your policies. You only get to hire 2 employees, and that's your town attorney and your town manager. So this is an important hire for you, because it determines how effective you are as a town council. And so I'll stop there and see if you have any questions.
Council questions? I think the cost was $3,500.
Yes, and we do this as a service for our local governments. A similar service for our private consultant would cost you somewhere between $25,000 and $30,000.
Okay, council, if you have no further, yes, sir, I'm sorry.
I have a plethora of questions, but I'll try to limit myself to a couple. Citizens and council members may have noticed that there was a schedule of key steps in the agenda package, which started with a meeting on November 29th with Anthony Starr and members of city members of council, and 3 members of council were not been seated yet. That meeting never took place, so this information is passed out, which is very helpful, is new to us, and as I implied, I didn't get a chance to ask that plethora of questions. I've been on executive searches at both ends, finding replacements for myself, and then unretiring and being placed in one. And then I used executive search firms to hire So it's, there's no question that your rate is good because the searches that I had to pay for in my previous organization cost 10 times that much. A couple, I guess two questions that I'll limit myself to. How many searches do you do at any one time? Because I know that, I assume this is not the main response, the main area of your responsibility as executive director of COG.
Correct, so, we'll run, usually it's not more than a couple, most 3 at a time. This last year, we ran 8 of these in our region.
At one time?
Not at one time, just throughout the year, we had 8 different searches going on.
And do you have others going on now that you're working on?
Just one at this point, and that's Brandon Falls Town Manager Search. And the way it works, and to your question about my personal time, David and Tasman handle a lot of the logistical work of putting stuff together, and I'm involved in the parts that are the judgment, the subjective aspects, evaluating candidates, working with you as the council. So we do that to try to manage my time, manage their time, and be efficient that way.
Just one more question. You, of course, explained that you cannot name, none of us can name any candidate who's been considered, and I respect that. So let me ask you a question that I always ask my search firms. You're being familiar with the town managers in this part of North Carolina, maybe all the way across North Carolina. So if we came to you and said, you don't have to tell us the name, but you know who the best 3 town managers are in Western North Carolina. Will you go recruit them to come and apply and interview with us? Would you do that?
I will typically, I don't know if I put like a number on it, but I will contemplate who I think are, David and I both will contemplate who we think are good candidates.
That's not what I asked you.
And we will reach out to them and encourage them to apply.
Okay. My feeling is that we don't need to do this tonight. I think it would fit better in January. It would be great if we could hire an interim manager tonight. I think the interim manager might be able to help with the search processes as well. Again, when I was helping my organization find a replacement for me, I was involved, not directly, but indirectly helped the process quite a bit. So I just, I'd like to get our documentation that we provide with the agenda package up to date with all of the latest information that we have. That's what I feel about it, though.
Second that motion.
Well, I don't know. I don't know how other people feel. I didn't want to dominate this conversation, but I've been there, so that's why I'm supporting it.
My personal opinion is that I think there's no better time than the present to begin the search for an interim manager. I think we need to get the ball rolling, and the best way to do that is to enter into a contract with COG to start the process.
So are we looking right now, is this for the interim manager, or this is for the actual manager, is what we're talking about right now?
Correct.
Tonight, we will hopefully be making the decision on interim manager, so that will be taken care of. I do like the idea of having, this is information that was not put in the packet that went out. I would have liked to have looked over it a little more before the meeting, so I don't have a problem. We're looking at, 2.5 weeks till our next meeting. It's Christmas. There's not a lot that's gonna be happening between now and our next regular council meeting that we couldn't put it off. This is the actual, manager. This isn't the interim. We would have an interim in place. So, I personally like to read over things before I make a decision, and not having this information kind of makes me step back.
This is in our packet.
a motion, we table this motion. And we table this matter, so we don't have a motion, do we? We don't have a motion.
You currently do not have a motion, just to make it if you want to table it to a definite period, the January regular meeting.
I just move that we table this item.
Okay.
Second,
Second.
further discussion?
So are we saying we would go back to it in January, or if that's not part of the motion, does that have to be part of the motion?
Yes, it will not be picked up in January as it's currently cast.
It will not be picked up in
No.
January.
You said it would or would not?
It will not. This is a motion to table indefinitely, as it's been stated.
Is that what you're asking, to table it indefinitely?
So it's taken off the table.
Again, I think we need to begin the process of finding a permanent manager. The longer we delay this, the more difficult it's gonna be. We need a leader, we need a town manager to lead us. And I think it's critical for us to begin the process. And COG has Council of Government, this is exactly what they do. They'll provide the expertise and the guidance. As one councilman mentioned, we're getting a very good deal, $3,500. So again, I would reiterate, I think we need to begin the process of finding a permanent manager.
I would agree with that, and certainly, if not tonight, certainly by January 7th, it should be on the docket, ready to go. So I would disagree to table it permanently. I mean, we've got to start searching for a manager.
Gary, you go for second? Okay. Have a motion and a second? You need to-
I would just remind the council that there is the organization that county and municipal managers belong to. I think it's a national organization, something that, they all have their initials behind them. That organization publishes a list of search firms, and I downloaded that list and shared it with council members. As far as I know, we haven't looked at any other search firm to see what they might charge, to see what kind of results they have. So that's just another reason why I think we need to spend a little more time on getting ready to do the most important thing that we're going to do in the next couple of years.
Okay. Any further comments before I call for a vote?
Can I have a clarification, please?
Yes,
So
sir.
the motion currently is to table the issue, correct?
Yes, sir. Okay, I have a motion and a second. Those in favor signify by saying yes and raising your right hand.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Real quick, when we vote verbally, please speak up in the mic so Jessica can pick it up. Okay?
You want us to vote again?
Yeah, let's vote again. All those in favor signify by saying yes and raising your right hand.
Yes?
Okay, very good. Those opposed signify by saying no and raising your right hand.
No.
Okay, motion carries 3-2. Okay, item C, consideration of the United States Department of Agriculture application for federal assistance in USDA rural development law. I believe Bo is going to speak to that. Is that correct? I think a couple of council members may have a question about the loan that we talked about earlier today.
So, just kind of bring council up to date. So after the last meeting when we terminated our architect's contract, USDA has contacted us, asking us to de-obligate the funds. So they taught them what's going on, and that's kind of their request. So it's nothing that needs to be taken action on, just a letter that we write out to them and signed by the board.
Okay. So we don't need to vote on it?
No.
Okay.
Okay, so that, I mean, there's obviously nowhere we can go with that line, is what you're saying. And they say, I know it's all for new construction, so there's no.
Right, we've addressed that issue with them, and it is designated for new construction only.
Okay.
So.
Thank you, Bo. Council. Item D, approval of resolution for adopting the 2024 Town Council meetings calendar. I believe you have a copy of that in your packet. Any discussion? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the 2024 Town Council meetings calendar.
I make a motion to approve the town council meeting schedule for 2024.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. If you would note one thing on the date on your calendar, on the February 4th date, on the part that's in your agenda, that's actually a Sunday. So that was moved to February 5th. That's the only change. Okay, I have a motion, a second. All those in favor of approving the 2024 Town Council meeting calendar signify by raising your right hand and stating yes.
Yes.
Those opposed signify by saying no and raising your right hand. Motion carries. Thank you. All right, E, consideration of appointments and/or reappointments to boards, commissions, and/or committees. I think you have those also in your agenda packet. And I'll entertain a motion to approve those assignments. I think I'm going to need one. I do need one to approve those.
I make a motion that we approve the appointments and reappointments to boards, commissions, and committees.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Those in favor signify by saying yes and raising your right hand.
Yes.
Yes.
Those opposed, no, and raise your right hand. Motion carries. Thank you, Council. Okay, item F, discussion of new boards, commissions, and/or committees.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to address that.
Go ahead.
So as part of what I had ran on, along with a couple of the new council members, we had ran on being transparent and having more in-depth looks into things as far as research about departments and things in the town and how we can better our town. Part of that was an efficiency task force. This would be to assist the interim town manager in an in-depth analysis of each town operation as the manager develops the 2023-24 annual budget. There would be also a drug and homeless advisory task force added. This would help address homelessness and the physical and mental issues underlying our drug and crime issues in our town, coordinating efforts with local churches, local agencies, and involving Burke County initiatives to advise the town council on these matters. The other is a facilities review board. This is going to be a standing board that will advise the manager and council on the management, maintenance, improvements, or construction of town properties. Since this board will oversee real property, much as the planning board oversees land use, the manager and initial members will develop a charter structured similar to the planning board. So that's just to kind of describe what those new committees would be, so everyone will be up to date.
Okay. I'm going to ask the attorney, if you will, to discuss the town ordinance section 2-1021, which gives authority of the mayor only to appoint boards and councils and committees.
So council, mayor, I think the creation of the committee, which is what is being proposed now, can be done by council, but the ordinance does in fact provide that appointment to the committees themselves will be made by the mayor. So that's under our ordinance. If you guys have any questions on it, I'm happy to share, but I think these issues can be voted on by council as far as creation of committees.
And since this is just a discussion item, maybe for the next meeting, we can, or maybe right now, how how will we go about getting the members on these committees? Or, if you
So basically, what we were trying to do is go ahead and introduce the committees, what our ideas were for them. And then we are open to discussion about who needs to be on those. We didn't come with a list of
Sure.
this is who needs to be on there. I know all the council, we all know people that we don't know. You know, we know people you don't know, so coming together and saying, hey, we've got people who will be great for this. I know for me, a part of my heart is the drug and homelessness issue. And I've already had, pastors and different organizations contact me and say, we would love to see that in Valdese, we want to help with that. So it's already, there's people who are ready and waiting to help. So, people that y'all know and we know and have a lot of faith in. So I want us to work together to create
Sure.
those, definitely.
Okay. Council?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. I know the planning board serves solely for the purpose of it as an advisory board to the council. So I assume none of these committees will have really any authority other than giving advice and counsel and direction to the town council, because ultimately it's the council's decision to decide what direction we go. The development of a charter, is that, I would ask council, is that, does that make sense that a charter would be developed for some of these committees? Would that give them authority in any respect?
Yeah, so no committee will have authority over council. They'll all report to council, but as far as development of a charter, that's the first I've heard of that, so I'll need to look into it.
Can I have some clarification maybe on what the purpose would be for developing a charter? I've really never heard of that.
In the world I came from, all committees had charters, just simply describe scope, purpose, how the members would be formed, how many members and so on. Basically, what's in front of us here.
I think this also goes into the strategic planning that we entered into with the COG just a few minutes ago. I think they can help us with this, help us establish, get us some guides, points, what to do. I think that's one thing that they can help us do. I think that's one reason we went into the strategic planning assistance with them.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good place to discuss that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Find out exactly how we want to do that. Any further comments?
I think it would be interesting to have, CEOs, plant managers, financial officers, project leaders. I mean, it would be on the efficiency task force. I'm always open to running things more efficiently and more effectively. I hope that we could get some participation from local business leaders. I think it might be a little difficult to transpose what they do with their company over to municipal government, but I don't have all the answers, that's for sure, so.
Okay. Any further discussion, council? Okay. Moving on to item G, and council, at this time, I'll entertain a motion to table item 4G until after the closed meeting.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I make a motion that the town hire Kenneth Brian Steen as interim manager under the written agreement for employment as interim town manager, a copy of which will be published with the minutes of this meeting or such other substantially similar agreement approved and executed by the mayor on behalf of the town of Valdese.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
I second.
Any further discussion? Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, I address my comments in support of this motion to you in accordance with Robert's Rules of Order, but I'll speak into the microphones and I'll provide a copy of my comments to the town clerk and to reporters who are here. As you, Mr. Mayor, and other members of council and the UNC School of Government faculty know, and as we heard from Mr. Starr earlier, the most important decision the town council makes is hiring the town manager. Valdese was founded on religious premises and has been blessed in many ways. This month, as we are reminded of the reason for the season, Valdese has been twice blessed. This motion enables a second blessing. The first blessing for citizens and employees was the generous contribution of 4 weeks of dedicated service by an executive whose managerial experience may be the most extensive of any resident among fulfilling other management responsibilities. Mr. Eddie Peru has instilled a sense of calm in employees who have been under a toxic workplace cloud of believing their jobs were at stake with this recent election. With Brian Steen on the job, while the council searches for a permanent manager, Valdese will be served by a level of governmental management experience that neither Valdese nor any other comparable North Carolina town has ever known. Brian Steen recently retired after 11 years as Burke County manager, where his span of responsibility was 10 times what it will be in Valdese, with 800 employees and a budget of $100 million. His broad prior experience included 3 years as superintendent of street maintenance for the city of Sanford, North Carolina, where he had 130 miles of streets to maintain. Brian Steen was in law enforcement for 18 years, including the North Carolina Department of Justice, and 9 years with the North Carolina State Highway Patrol as a master trooper. The mandate from Valdese citizens demands that the police chief vacancy be addressed immediately. Mr. Steen's deep law enforcement experience is a natural fit with that need. In speaking with hundreds of citizens over the past 4 months, 3 current council members heard this scenario expressed in different ways. The scenario was, we see drug deals happening, even on Main Street, with no police intervention. Yet citizens are being fined and threatened with the arrest of their pets, simply on one officer's interpretation of the leash ordinance. Valdese needs a manager, it needs a fully staffed police department, and it needs a police chief in place now. Mr. Mayor, you and all the council members have interviewed Mr. Steen and 2 other candidates. We studied their resumes, we looked at their budgets, we investigated the websites of the organizations they managed. We liked what we saw. However, Mr. Steen's experience is so exceptional that his availability will truly be a blessing to our town at this time. May we please respectfully complete our discussion and vote on this motion as quickly as possible.
Okay, council, you have a motion for the hiring of Brian Steen as interim town manager. I need a second, please.
Second.
I apologize. Any further discussion? Seeing none, those in favor signify by saying yes and raising your right hand.
Yes.
Those opposed signify by saying no and raising your right hand. Motion carries. Thank you, council. Thank you, Mr. Carter. Okay, item H, consideration of amendment of town council rules of procedures pursuant to Rule 33 of the Valdese Town Council Rules of Procedures. All right, council, you have those in your agenda packet, the changes that are being requested to be made. And our attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, but this will require a 2/3 vote.
Mr. Mayor, could you please clarify what this would require?
They'll require 4 votes to
Okay.
pass.
We're waiting for a motion? Yeah, well, somebody's got to fill the gap here. I move approval of the amendment to the rules and procedures pursuant to Rule 33 of the Valdese Town Council as presented, and let's see somewhere here. There we go. Rule 4 would be amended, striking the words electronic and on their iPads, and inserting in bold, underlined, so it would read, as far as the schedule for the town agenda, the town council agenda, it would read, each council member shall receive the proposed agenda and agenda package by Friday afternoon prior to the Monday meeting for the January meeting and the June meeting with new budget, and 10 days prior to all other regularly scheduled council meetings. And proposed agenda shall be available for public inspection and distribution or copying when it is distributed to council members. That was one amendment. The second one is simply to amend Rule 4 of the agenda, striking Rule 4, Section B, the consent agenda, just striking it so there would be no consent agenda, that each item that comes before council will be dealt with separately instead of clustered in, under a consent agenda. That would be my motion.
Okay. All right, council, you have a motion. Do I have a second? Council, I need a second.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Yes, just, the main thing here is, the most important thing is to get the agendas out in time for council members to study them and for citizens to study them, and if necessary, for the town manager to talk with department heads instead of just having them come out on Friday for Monday's meeting. Now, having been responsible for the board of an association for 25 years, my association board members were all over the country, in fact, a few countries, and we had a the board didn't require it, but the executive director of the organization did, that the board members would have those agendas 2 weeks before every meeting. They had ample time to study them. I would have department heads come to me and say, gee, I got this $1 million thing I just got to get approved at this meeting. If they missed the deadline, sorry, we come back to the next board meeting. We've seen some examples here of big contracts, big issues going through this council without even time for the town attorney to have ample review of them. So all this does is provide enough time for the council members and the citizens to study the issues that come out. And that meetings calendar that we just approved has public meetings prior, about a week before each of about 8 or 10 of the meetings, of the regular meetings, and having this agenda out 10 days before the regular meeting gives citizens and council members the opportunity to have a dialogue about the items on the upcoming agenda.
And Mr. Mayor, as something that I've seen in talking to citizens, a lot of them look at Washington and they see how they just shove things down people's throat. They come in with this big, huge bill and nobody has a chance to read it. I don't like being compared to people in Washington because I'm not a politician. I am somebody who genuinely cares about my town. I don't want it to ever be said about me that I just shove through whatever I'm told to. I want it to be where people can look at it, have a chance to call me and say, Heather, I'm concerned about this. Can you bring this to the table? It's all about transparency, and to be honest, a lot of people don't have time between Friday and Monday to read. I've seen them where there were hundreds of pages that we're having to read through. Most citizens don't have time to do that. We have to make it a priority, being on the council, but most citizens don't have time to do that. So giving them a little bit of extra time to go through the documents, I think it helps us fulfill what we promised as far as being more transparent and open, and people can't say you just rubber stamp everything that comes along the desk. It's, we're looking at it for ourselves. So that's how I feel.
I'd like to say, I checked into the Burke County Board of Commissioners, who serves the 90,000 residents in Burke County, and they do that anybody can put something on the agenda at least 2 working days before the date of the minute of the meeting, and they also, the agenda packet doesn't come in till around 72 hours before the meeting. The school system, which also serves about 12 to 13,000 students, and also would be a lot of the 90,000 residents of Burke County also follows the same thing that we have been following, which is the 72 hours before the meeting begins, the agenda. When I ran for this office, I realized that is something that I would need to do with my time if I wanted to be a member of the town council. If the agenda, because I knew, having been in the school system, that it comes out about 72 hours, that I've got to plan my weekends and devote my time so that I have time to study that packet and be ready for the meeting on Monday nights.
Can council give us, because I think this falls within the realm of maybe standard business practices of businesses and municipalities, can you give us some historical perspective of, or what local governments do?
Yeah, I can't give you a historical perspective, but I can
Well,
tell other local governments,
current.
it certainly is an acceptable practice to have a consent agenda. To the extent an item needs further consideration or reflection, obviously you can take anything off the consent agenda at the meeting by motion, and then that would be voted on separately. So it is a common practice, and municipalities that I'm familiar with, they use that practice.
So this would be a little out of the norm if we remove the consent agenda.
It would be, but it's something you can do if you choose to do it, yeah.
And do you have an opinion on what other municipalities do as far as the 72 hours to when their packet is, delivered to council, or your experience with other councils?
Yeah, so in my experience, most are delivered on the Friday before the meeting the following week. Yep.
Yes, sir.
I would just comment that, I don't think it's a legal issue, is it? And what's wrong with doing something a little more transparent than other municipalities? That's all we're looking for, is more transparency, time to be able, the alternative, and what will happen is that, I know one council member is not gonna approve big proposals that are rushed through on Friday without appropriate documentation. So they'll just be postponed to the next meeting. That isn't gonna help anything. I think we just press the staff to get things out a little faster. Or, wait a month, we had, this on November 20, the council called a special meeting on Friday afternoon for something you considered an emergency, I guess, to deal with the town manager. But there's always an opportunity, if something has to be done, it can be done before the next regular meeting.
I vote would not be one of, transparency obviously is a concern, but also efficiency in operating town government. The pressures that would be placed upon department heads, we have done it this way in the past, doesn't mean we need to do it this way in the future. Whatever council decides, we'll decide. But again, I think this is an issue of how we want to operate our town government. And if we have an issue that doesn't hit the agenda, then it's got to wait, 5 weeks until, and sometimes those issues they're pressing, they need to be addressed then. So it's never been a stress on me. I've always read the packet Friday before, the town council meeting. I know, as Rexana says, I know I have to dedicate some time to read that packet of information. And it's available to the public to do so also. So it's very transparent to the public. I just think it would put an undue burden on our staff and our department heads to get this information to us 10 days prior. I just think it would be much more efficient operation of government to require, as we had, 3 days, 72 hours.
And I would say, I think the reason for a consent agenda is to make a meeting go a little quicker, correct? We usually have minutes mainly on the consent agenda, so I just really struggle to see why we wouldn't need a consent agenda. The other organizations that I looked at in this county have a consent agenda. It's in their minutes.
It's generally for routine items that don't need discussion or that need to be voted on. We have a consent agenda, and that's the purpose of it.
But now, the consent agenda, anything can be pulled off the consent agenda.
Absolutely,
Yep, and added to.
You don't, the regular,
Correct.
yeah, you can take it off the consent agenda, you sure can.
And we saw that at the last meeting. We took an item off the consent agenda, and it was a mess. Well, you know, the point is, if we're gonna have public meetings a week before each of the regular meetings, and we're gonna give the citizens the opportunity to review the big items coming before the council, having the agenda out before those meetings lets the citizens do that. Holding everything until last minute, I mean, we saw just a month or two ago, we heard about an item for the first time in a presentation. Right behind it was a $1 million contract that was approved. It hadn't been out for review by anybody. In fact, it was approved with an amendment, with the provision subject to approval by the town attorney. I mean, you know, and that particular contract, that services won't be called on for 4 or 5 months. Wait on the road. There was no rush on that. A lot of times, you know, things are just rushed through, and we just need, I mean, surely the town can work a month in advance. Let's, you know, let's have transparency and give citizens the opportunity to look at what it is we're deciding, that's all.
Any more comments, discussion? I have a motion and a second. Okay, those in favor signify by raising your hand. At your right hand, say yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Those opposed, raise your right hand, state no.
No,
Okay, I see 3 to 2, motion fails. Okay, council, number 5, departmental reports, preliminary audit highlights. Mr. White.
All right, let's talk some numbers. So our audit is completed. The auditors will be here next meeting to give their audit opinion, audit report. So we just want to do a preliminary audit report here. Audit's a big, big, package of information. So trying to break it down, make it a little understandable, some numbers that we can use, okay? That's kind of what we're gonna do here. So, the audit report is one of the important documents that the town produces every year. There's 2 important documents. There's the budget, and that's usually around June. And then we have the audit, which is around December timeframe. So those are the 2 that you'll hear the most about. And so the budget, we actually talk about more. Sometimes the audit kind of gets lost and so forth. But if you think about the budget, and we're just gonna go over this briefly, then we'll get into the numbers. The budget is, you're looking at that windshield. The budget's helping us navigate what's up ahead. We got the mountains, we've got some rough terrain. That budget document and the budget process helps us to navigate through those things. But the audit is like looking at that rear view mirror. How are we doing navigating? How are we navigating Valdese? The decisions that we make with the budget, how are we turning out? We gotta look at the rear view mirror to find that out, right? So that's kind of what the audit's telling us. And if you, I'm gonna pull up the audit real quick. So this is the actual audit document. It's over 100 pages long. Lots of numbers, lots of data. A lot of time to read through it, right? So it can be a little cumbersome. So what I wanted to do here tonight is kind of break it down for us a little bit. Some useful information that we might be able to help with our upcoming budget process, because the 2 documents do go hand in hand. The audit helps us guide us through the budget process. So, looking at some audit report data, first we'll start with the general fund. And remember, this is taxpayer funded. We've got property taxes and sales taxes really drive this fund, right? So if we look at it in calculations that we perform for this are operations ratio, debt service, quick ratio, and our available fund balance. Now, when we jump over to the utility fund side, there's another thing we're gonna look at. That's more of a business operation. That's customer funded, that's our water and sewer rates that we set, right? So we're gonna look at those items and how we're navigating a little differently. We'll look at more like we're running a business. So we'll look at total margin ratio, again, debt service, quick ratio, which is a little different formula there, net position available, and then a charge to expense. And these are just a few, there's tons of ratios and stuff we can look at, but these are some of my favorites that we can kind of help guide us. So jump in the general fund real quick here. So the operations ratio, what does this mean? Well, it's telling us whether the town's annual revenues are sufficient to pay for our annual operations. And to do that calculation, we look at page 18 of the audit. It's called the Statement of Revenue and Expenditures for the General Fund. So that page 18 is what's going to give us the numbers for our formula here. And as we go through this, I'll try to give a little screenshot of that page and then highlight the numbers out we use. We won't go through the calculations, but this is total revenues of your total expenditures and transfers out. So prior 5 years, let's kind of give you a snapshot. Valdese, last year we ended at 1.23, so you can see we're kind of rising over the last 5 years on this operations ratio. And for this current audit, we ended at 1.19, so we're going to expect that bar to come down next year just slightly. But anything above 1 is good. So that means the Valdese is able to maintain our current services based on the revenues in the general fund that are being collected. So that's a good score right there, okay? Next thing we're going to look at is debt service ratio. And it is what it is, it sounds like. How much of our annual expenditures are committed to paying debt service? And remember, we're from the general fund only. Again, we're going to use page 18 of the audit report. And prior 5 years, we can see we're coming down a little bit. We're at 0.06 in 2022 is where we ended. 2023, we're at 0.05, or you can say 5% of our annual expenditures are made on debt service. And so it's been a few years since Valdese has issued debt in the general fund, and that's why we can see is interest and principal are coming down. Those bars will be coming down, okay? So 5% means Valdese is slightly reliant on issuing debt, but it's still only 5% of our total expenditures. All right, quick ratio. So this looks at our cash and investments versus our current liabilities. And it shows how liquid Valdese is. How liquid are we to meet our short-term obligations? So short-term obligations, we're looking at a year or less, okay? So for this one, we look at page 14 in the audit, and that would be the balance sheet. So the prior 5 years, you can see we're growing in liquidity. In 2022, we ended at 78. 2023, we dropped down a little bit to 53, which isn't bad, nothing to be alarmed about. Anything really above 30 is an indicator that shows that we're a healthy financial condition, and it shows that we can handle an economic slowdown or a brief recession because we are that liquid and we can meet our short-term obligations. All right, here's one that everybody hears about, fund balance, right? All right, so fund balance available. This is the one that gets talked about a lot. 6.58 million is our fund balance available. That's a lot of money. Or is it? Why do we say that? Well, if you think of it this way, 6.5 million for the city of Charlotte, that might last in 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, right? So instead of saying how much money we have in fund balance, which we can, we have 6.58 million in available fund balance, we actually measure this as a percentage of the amount of funds available versus our expenditures. Because we use a percentage, then that puts us on a level playing field with larger municipalities, smaller municipalities. It kind of shows a percentage of it. So to calculate that percentage of available fund balance, we actually go to 2 pages in the audit, page 16, Statement of Revenues and Expenditures, and then page 14 back to the balance sheet. So we use unassigned funds over expenditures, and as we can see, since 2018, we've been rising very well. with our available fund balance. 113% is where we ended in 2022. And for this audit, we ended at 105. So we dipped down a little bit. And I think that's because we spent some cash on some capital projects, is why we saw that dip. But having the help, now this is a very healthy fund balance. And it allows us to take advantage of time-sensitive opportunities, invest on large projects without having to borrow. It helps increase our investment earnings if it's just sitting idle there. And it helps cover unforeseen events and emergencies if they happen. So a fun little fact here. So if we had 8% fund balance, that's equal to 1 month of savings or reserves. So if you take 100% divided by 12 months, it gives you 8%. So 105% where we're at, if you divide that by 8, that would say we got 13 months of reserves. So if no sales tax money was coming in, if property taxes weren't coming in, we'd be able to float for 13 months until we went bankrupt. So that's kind of where we're sitting there. It's a fun little exercise to do with your own personal savings too, if you wanted to. You can just, divide that by 80% and see how many months you have. All right, so that is general fund. I'm going through this a little fast. If you have any questions, just interrupt me.
Okay, interrupt you.
No, sure. Gives me a chance to get a drink of water.
Yeah, okay, good, take a drink of water. The current fund balance that we have, does that include any grant money or ARPA money or anything like that? Can you?
That's a great question. So available fund balance means it's free to use on whatever we want. So grant monies, the ARP money is in there because it's free to use on what we need to use it on. There's no restriction to it. Any monies that are saved in capital project fund are not included in this. So public safety building comes to mind. We remember we talked about we had 1.4 million sitting there. That's separate from this. So that's separate. But this is just whatever council legally wants to spend.
And the COVID ARPA money, was that 700,000?
That was about 1.3 million, and that we got the last payment of that last year.
Okay.
So it's just kind of sitting there waiting to be used.
Okay.
Yeah, but we haven't used on anything.
So you said that was in the fund balance?
Yeah, that's included in there.
Okay, all right, that's what I thought.
So, and that's why we didn't take such a big hit. We only dropped 8% last year because we had influx of that money. So, yeah.
Yes, sir.
At the last meeting, the contract with CBSA was terminated. So we're not going to have to pay the full amount of $445,000 plus some other things they had already paid for. What impact does that have on the fund balance? Will that slow down the depletion of it or add to it? Could you explain what that factor is? Because by my rough calculations, there's at least maybe $150,000 was cut off that contract. So that was positive somehow. I just don't know if it goes up or if it doesn't, if it prevents going down.
Good question. So remember, we're talking about fund accounting. So those funds are in a capital project fund called the Public Safety Building. So anything that happens within that, until we cancel that project, they're standalone. So that wouldn't affect the fund balance available in the general fund. The general fund's kind of the big brother that has all these little ponds off of it. So the capital project fund is self-contained. Now, once we want to end that project completely, that 1.4 million that's sitting there, that would be the amount that's affected by the architect contract. So anything that's left of that, then we could dump it back into fund balance available if we needed to. So right now, that money has to be spent on capital, on the public safety building only. But once the council decides to close that project, then I would put it back into the general fund balance.
How much has been going into that capital project budget each year recently?
So the annual operating budget's been pushing in about 324,000 last year. So it's going up we've been saving towards it every year. So this current budget year, we put 324,000 from general fund into the capital project fund. But that was part of the
that can be used toward repair of our public safety building or whatever,
Yeah.
whatever council decides.
Correct.
Is it your opinion that sales tax revenues are they flattening out, or are they declining?
Yeah,
Probably so.
they're definitely flattened out the last 2 months compared to the same months last year. Has been a little less, not an extravagant amount, but a couple $1,000s less than it was at this time last year.
And that will affect our fund balance, correct?
It can, yeah.
Okay.
If we budget too much or too little, how that, so if we're budget conservatively and we get a little more sales tax in, that'll help us build that fund balance. Okay, all right. Well, if everybody's ready, we'll jump into the utility fund, or otherwise known as water sewer. Remember, we're talking about a business. We look at things a little bit differently here. General fund's taxpayer driven, utility fund is business driven. So for this one, we're going to look at total margin ratio. And what this tells us is the business operations living within its financial means? We look at page 20, the statement of revenues and changes in fund net position for this one, page 20 in the audit. So prior 5 years, about flat. Last year, we ended at 1.0, which is the break-even point. So anything below 1 for this calculation, your business is not living within the financial means. Anything above 1, we are. So how do we end with this audit? 1.08. That's very good. So what that tells us, anything above 1 means that we're providing water and sewer operations within the business itself. But, as we stay closer to that 1.0 mark, it says we're not overcharging for services, but we're also not building reserves for future large projects as well. So that's something to keep in mind. There's no, for this, there's no market rate of where you should be at. In my experience, 1.2 here would be a good number, maybe a good goal to be at. So we're not too far away there. Obviously, we've been climbing the last few years. This council's worked hard on bringing that up. So just something to keep in mind there, the total margin ratio, living within our financial means. So we are right now. All right. Debt service ratio, again, how much of our expenditures are being spent on debt. So this one, we look at page 20 and then page 91 of the audit. Last year, we ended at 6%. And this current year, and we also ended at 6%. Okay, so not too much change there. So 6% of the expenditures in the utility fund are being spent on debt. Remember, general fund was 5%. So, and one thing to note on this that's different than general fund, the state has a division of water infrastructure, and they actually provide us some very low interest loans that we qualify for them. So we have a few loans out there that are like 1.5%, I believe, 1 to 1.5%. So the Neither project was a big one that we got a very low interest rate on. So the state helps us with some of those loans and getting lower. But sometimes it makes sense to borrow that money and then invest with our higher rates instead of paying cash. All right. So again, we're going to look at quick ratio. This is liquidity. We saw this at the general fund, but our formula is a little different here. We look at cash and investments, but then we take our current liabilities and take out our deferred revenues. When we say deferred revenues, those are things that we've gotten, payments we've gotten now for the future, such as customer deposits, things like that. So we look at page 19 in the audit for this one. The prior 5 years, 7.46 is where we ended last year. And this year we're at 10.8. So that's very good. 1.0 is where our line is, our dividing line. So if we were below 1.0, we would owe more on our current bills than we could pay. So we would have difficulty paying our bills. But here, you can see we're well above 1, and our water utility system continues to be sustainable. Okay, any questions yet? All right, 2 more. Just bear with me. I know this is a long, but position ratio. So this is our unrestricted net position, and it looks at total liabilities, long-term obligations, and it tells us how solvent the business is. So again, we're using page 19, and for the prior 5 years, we were at 50%, or last year we ended at 50%, and this year we ended at 69. So as that's increasing, that's a good thing. We're very solvent. We can handle our current net position, can handle the rising costs of production as we go along. Again, I want to refrain from calling it our fund balance, but it's most closely related to a fund balance in a business sense. So again, we look at the 8% is 1 month of expenditures, or 69% of net position means we have about 8.5 months of expenses. So if nobody paid their water sewer bill, I hope it doesn't happen as I say this, but we'd be able to float for 8.5 months before our business went under. So ideally, we'd like to see that around 12 months. That would be a more comfortable position in case we got some huge catastrophe or something, but 8.5 months is a lot better position than other utility systems out there at this time, so we're doing good there. And the last one, charge to expense ratio, and this is one this is one of my favorite ones, because it tells us how self-sufficient we are. Are our current charges for services able to cover our total expenses? So to calculate this one, we use page 88 in the audit and page 20. So you can see we've kind of been flat the last few years. We entered at 0.88. So 1.0 is that breaking point. We want to be above 1 if possible. We ended at 0.89, so we're slowly getting there. So being self-sufficient at 1 means that charging the correct rates to maintain our water and sewer system. Now this calculation includes depreciation, and that's important to note because as the age of our assets get older, that's what kind of hurts our calculation here. So, you know, as we invest in more assets, that accumulated depreciation is smaller. So that will help build our number here to where we're more self-sufficient. But it's kind of a give and take. You know, you've got aging assets, but then you've got rates to match that. So just something to keep in mind. Again, remember this is all to help us in the budget process. All right, so last slide here, some key takeaways. Let's kind of do a brief. I know I went through a lot of that very quickly. I'll do a brief overview. Remember, we're looking in the rearview mirror because this is helping us. Where are we navigating? Where have we been? And then we got budget coming up, so let's try to keep some of this in mind. So in the general fund, our operations ratio dropped slightly, but it's still above 1, meaning we're able to maintain our current services based on the revenues in the general fund. Quick ratio also dipped, but we're still very liquid, and we don't have any problems meeting short-term obligations and paying our bills. We have a strong fund balance. It did decrease by about 8% last year, and that was mainly due to the capital project that we paid cash for. So we're sitting good there. And then in our business, our water and sewer, total margin ratio exceeded 1 for the first time in 5 years. So that indicates the system's operating within its financial means, and we're able to continue operating under that current charges. But we don't have a lot of wiggle room for upcoming capital assets that we need to replace. Remember the accumulated depreciation we just talked about, that kind of affects that there. Quick ratio is above 1, so we keep paying our current bills. Unrestricted net position is going well to meet those longer term obligations. But remember, the system's still not quite self-sufficient, so larger future expenses could pose a problem with the assets getting older. So, all right, any questions?
Can I ask one, Charlie? Question. I was looking, is it true that we owe $89,000 a year for 28 more years on this building, which would be almost $2.5 million? Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's somewhere around 2027.
Do you remember what the original cost of the building was?
$1.8 million.
So, I mean, 12 years in, we owe way more than it originally cost. I just think
Yeah,
the citizens ought to know.
that was a 40-year loan.
40-year loan. Do we have another 40-year loan on a fire truck as well, right?
Yes. But we don't have that much, I don't think we have about 10 or 12 payments left on that.
Good. Okay. So that's $7,416 a month. Okay. Council, anyone else? Yes, sir.
Thank you. Excuse me. Just like to thank Mr. Michael, and I have to apologize for referring to my experiences, but they're the only ones I've had. Over 25 years, I had 3 CPAs reported to me as the Chief Financial Officer and Finance Director. Last week, we had a meeting where I had some questions for Mr. Michael, and he exceeded my expectations, and then he gave me some more information, even what I was looking for. I requested that we have a preview of the audit this evening. He again exceeded my expectations, so all I can say is he's as good as any CPA I've ever known, and he knows not only the accounting principles, but he follows the principles of assuring that we stay within the accounting guidelines, so thank you.
He's the only one I've ever seen get excited over numbers.
Well,
You don't know Glenn yet. You don't know Glenn well enough yet.
We've always said he's very good.
Excellent.
Thank you. Okay, council. Item 6, budget amendments, if applicable. First one's to appropriate funds from the general fund for agreements with COG, and we only have one agreement, and that's for the strategic planning. So we'll address the budget amendment for the strategic planning process.
Correct, and that was for the option B in the contract for the $8,030.
Okay? Any questions?
I make a motion that we appropriate the funds from the general fund for the agreement with the COG for strategic planning.
Second, please.
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor, please raise your right hand, signify by saying yes.
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 Those opposed, same sign, signify by saying no. Motion carries. Thank you, council. Okay, item 6B, to appropriate funds from the general fund for engagement of the town manager or interim town manager. The only funds, and Bo, you might help me with this, would be, that I see that we need to appropriate or address would be the salary for the interim manager.
Yeah, the salary and the appropriate federal taxes and stuff. So that, since I don't have any number on that, we're gonna hold that off till January.
Okay, we'll move that to January. I'll need a motion to table that till January, please.
Make a motion to table the
Interim
the
manager
interim
salary.
manager salary until January.
Okay. Second,
I'll second.
thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, those in favor signify by raising your right hand and say yes.
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 Okay. Those opposed signify by saying no and raising your right hand. Motion carries. Okay. Item 7 is a closed session. Since we've already addressed everything, I don't see a need to go into a closed session. So I will assume I need a motion to adjourn. Okay, very good. Okay? That's all I have, council. I'll need a motion for adjournment.
I can make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
So be it. Thank you.